So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we have another battle on the ADUNAIM outpost. Now, I had a rather unfortunate experience with this map on the last patch, which is part of the reason why I'm actually doing it again, because I do actually want to showcase this map and do it a little bit more justice than the battle then provided to us, because this map was made by Sin of the Dark Cloud. There's been a few changes since last I've seen it actually, and it's the addition of this little area over here across this bridge as sort of a final stand area should the defenders need it, and also the addition, a much needed addition I think, just less so from a mechanical point of view, but just in the interest of map balance, another pathway up onto this area back here, because previously it was just a 360 surrounding on this one choke point of rangers from both sides, and it was a little bit unfortunate in that regard. So this makes it a little bit more likely that that won't happen. There isn't really a unified theme in this battle, it must be said. It's really just sort of a scattershot of many different factions, which is a bit unfortunate. Like, again, most people do prefer to watch a battle that has a unified theme, and I am included in that because it's kind of difficult to craft a narrative for a battle when everyone is just sort of picked a scattershot approach like this to choose their factions, because I can't really just, like, normally I sort of can reach a little bit and justify it, but on this occasion with Rune, Numenor and Lindon on the defence, and Mirkwood, Arthedain, Dunland, Isengard and Harad on the attack, there's nothing I can do to work with that. It's just an all over the place brawl today, unfortunately, from that perspective. But the battle itself should still be quite interesting with this amount of different strengths and weaknesses on display. So we'll go through the attackers first and foremost, starting off. We'll go through the armies fairly quickly, to be honest with you, because a lot of them are going to be hidden in the trees out here anyway, and also the battle is fairly long, so we won't linger too long on the compositions. Starting off with Mirkwood, so the Elven faction which is leading the attack today. Spears of Emondwyr on the front. We can see in behind some Javelins with the Woodland Protectors, which is always a good addition, as are the Hiri Outh, very, very nice unit of line infantry. They don't have the armour upgrade on this occasion, but that doesn't really matter too much. They don't really want to be the ones taking the initial brunt of the casualties anyway. They want to send forward the more disposable factions for that, and then commit this higher tier infantry later on. Hiri Peng, very nice heavier archer to be used as support. Upgraded Elven King's Palace Guard, of course one of the strongest units of infantry on foot, of the bodyguard category as well. Armour piercing, bonus against cavalry, everything going for it. Probably in terms of bodyguard infantry, I would say the most versatile unit all around. Still a little bit vulnerable to arrows, so if you can carve through their HP, even their armour upgrade isn't going to save them too much against saturated fire. But that's true about most of Mirkwood's roster, to be honest with you, so you're not going to be sending them forward on their own anyway. Blades of Emondwyr back here as well, sort of the more basic unit of elf infantry. Then, right in front of the outpost, we have Pimp, who's going to be playing as Arthedain. He's got some upgraded Arthedain man-at-arms. Going to be the first ones in, which should be good, capable of withstanding a decent amount of punishment with their full upgrades. Not necessarily the fastest at killing things in comparison to the Elven line infantry, but that's not really what the Western Kingdoms of Men are all about, at least not with that kind of unit. Arthedain Marksman with the upgrade as well, so again, nice unit to have in a skirmish. Upgraded Pikes, the armour upgrade will help them a little bit, both withstanding melee blows and also arrows, but still, if you're getting attacked up close and personal in melee or at range, then the armour upgrade won't really be enough to save you because of Pike's low stats. But if you can keep that Phalanx up and running, it'll be very, very good for Arthedain, as would of course the Numenor Gate Guards. Just down the road we can see the Knights of Numenor, the dismounted variant, which is going to be the General's Bodyguard, Arthedain Marksman, and there's presumably Dunedain hidden in the trees. Yeah, you can see Dunedain Troll Slayers hidden there, Dunedain Rangers, unsurprising, one of the main facets of the Arthedain army. Then we have King Ammar, who sent me this battle replay. I'm pretty sure I got sent this one twice. This battle's actually from a fair amount of time ago. It's just after the new patch released, but I never really got round to it. But I'm going to do it now because I don't want to leave people hanging for too long. Dunland. Dunland is still that faction which is kind of... It's not really intended to be a balanced faction. Like every other faction in the game has had some thought put into it with regards to making it balanced and competitive. Dunland isn't really that. They're a faction which has been lifted from the single-player alpha of the game. And as a result, they're a weak faction overall. You can bring a lot of numbers as Dunland, but you don't have a lot of quality, and they're not really a well-rounded faction at all, really. Gwathlo Trackers, a lot of their units are also borrowed from other factions like the Gwathlo Trackers, the Dunland Hunters, Half-Orc Spear Guards, so you can see Isengard, Rudal and Cardlan all accounted for here. Dunman Pikemen, bandits there with their javelins. Got some Snaga skirmishers in here as well, some Trollshore axe throwers. Riders of Orthanc. This is one of the very few unique units to Dunland. They sort of higher tier mounted crossbowmen. The only other mounted crossbows in the game are the mercenary crossbows, and these guys are significantly better than them, so it is really the one true strength of Dunland, the fact that they have this unit which really no one else has got an equivalent to. But in this sort of situation, their usefulness is going to be fairly limited unless they're saved for later on. Blackwolds, Berserker tier units of course, and then over here this is the other sort of unique unit for Dunland, the Spears of Orthanc, although to be honest with you, crossbowmen first and foremost, mixed with those heavy spears and shields. You could look at them as being fairly similar to the Nmenrean Royal Guard from Umbar, to be honest with you, only a crossbow unit and with less men in it. Interesting concept for a unit. I mean, Dunland do need units like this if they're going to be competitive at all, but here they make good cannon fodder, to be honest with you, with all the numbers they can bring. As do Isengard if they go for that sort of composition. Heneltir, or Heneltir, I'm going to call him Hen for the rest of the battle I think. Dunland Clansman, Half-Orc Baneguard on the front, and then in behind I imagine he's gone for a more balanced army like Isengard usually do indeed. Lots of pikes, lots of standard infantry, and you can see some crossbowmen and some archers as well. Uruk-hai Berserkers and Nazkai as well as the Trolls of the White Hand for the quality at the back. And then finally we have Harad, played by Tundras Fox, another name which we all very much are familiar with. Harad are another faction like Dunland which are going to be capable of bringing a lot of numbers if they so choose. Haradrim Archers with spears in the first line, Javelins as well, Muhard Beast Hunters just in behind, then some upgraded Serpent Guard, so a little bit more on the quality side of things with Serpent Guard, Trollmen, Champions of Nathrat back here. There's also a unit of Muhard Warriors right at the back, but we also have the Moomer. Interesting to see if they can be useful in this particular battle when the going gets tough inside the settlement. They can certainly smash through any defence, but can they make that stick? So the first of the defenders, we have Killeen, who's going to be playing as Rune. I almost said Rudour then. A couple of units of Carmel's chosen, so of course on the defence you can afford to go into the red limit on certain units. Interesting he's decided to do that such for the Carmel's chosen. Scion Rim, 3 units of them, a couple of units of Gamp Rim, a couple of units of Flag Rim. The Dragon's Breath, which is not as disgustingly overpowered as it was in the previous patch, but still potentially very, very dangerous if placed in the right position within the settlement. We'll see if he can get there before the Moomer close in. Dragon's Wrath crossbows, for all intents and purposes the Blacklock Engineers in this patch, until they sort of fine-tune their mechanics to be what the Dragon's Wrath crossbows are meant to be, which is sort of like a split-shot, close-range crossbowman. Didn't really work in the last patch though because it had real issues firing over the heads of its own men. Eastron Crossbowmen, Narim, Variag Mercenaries and Baltroth Tribesmen. Then within the settlement we have a combination of Numenor and Lindon, which is a scary duo to be fair. They both cover one another's weaknesses quite well, I would say. Steel Bows for the armour-piercing arrows from new player 195. Pharazim Swordmasters obviously very, very powerful in the current patch, Numenorian cohort. Seafarers of Nindamos with some Balagai units as well, archers and pikes. Royal Legion of Armenelos, Nmenrean Royal Guard. Further back we have more cohort, we have some Pharazim nobles for some mobility. We saw them used to good effect actually the last time we saw this battle run before the frames abandoned it. Numenorian cohort and shield guard, so yeah, pretty much what you'd expect. The higher end Numenorian infantry units backed up by all of their best support. And Lyndon, played by Tommy Wiseau, who I'm pretty sure was the other player who sent me this battle replay actually. Mythlon Marines, who are now very similar to the Seafarers of Nindamos in the way that they function, which is good for Lyndon, because obviously that's what they were always really intended to be. But their Javelins in the last patch weren't really up to snuff, even if they were okay in melee. That's still the case. You know, they're not going to be world beaters in melee, but they're still, at the end of the day, basic Elven line infantry, which means they're going to be better than any old garbage you send at them. Mythlon Swordmasters, Noldoran Blade Masters, who are now locked morale, so they're now the force they were always meant to be. Albeit the Pharazim Swordmasters' 3rd hit point probably puts them beyond the Noldoran Blade Masters at this point. Mythlon Pikemen. And then further forwards we can see guarding this approach. You can see 4 Lindon Marines and Pikes and the like, as well as some Harlinden Guard and some Horse Lords of Ulmo, as well as some Noldoran Guard. So of course, all of the best and brightest that Lyndon have to offer going to be on display here as well. So I'll make a cut here because I can't imagine that Arthedain are going to move forward all that quickly. They're probably going to wait for the support of Dunland, and also the attackers may very well wait until Harad and Isengard have passed through the mountains on the other side to start attacking. But I'll rejoin whenever there are some genuine moves towards the settlement. So I'm actually going to rejoin here, even though no arrows have actually been loosed just yet. There are moves towards the settlements on all sides, and the action is fairly imminent, I would say. Mirkwood in particular have been quite aggressive, getting right up into the face of this Lindon defence, but Lyndon not taking the bait and shooting the Spears of Amenduir, seeing them as a unit that they can deal with easy enough in melee, which is true considering Lyndon's powers there, but also the fact that Mercker have got plenty of other targets that would be better served to go after on the front. Interesting to see Arthedain sort of waving off to the side and probably going to leave. I'm not entirely sure where Arthedain's actually going, to be honest with you. You can see that a lot of their units appear to be heading towards the back of the map, which is rather odd. Well, I guess Arthedain has taken complete leave of his senses, but no matter. I'm sure he will return. Dunland, for the time being, can certainly pick up the slack when it comes to that assault. Rune have also been able to get back into the settlement without too many issues. The Moomer kill, after all, are not really the fastest at covering ground, and the only other cavalry units they've really had were the Mirkwood cav, which is currently putting pressure on the other side, and the mounted crossbowmen, which of course need to get fairly close before they can use up their ammo. Huntsman of Amon Lank, though? That is the sound of arrows being loosed, and indeed it is the Harland Guard immediately starting to open up, going after the Woodland Realm Patrol. So interesting to go after the archers, get the first few volleys off first and foremost to make sure you have the advantage in the skirmish fight. I'd say, given the relative positions of both of the units and the fact that the Harland Guard, while they still have the light armour that Lyndon are very well known for, they do at least have a shield, which means they would certainly be the favourites in a skirmish fight against the Woodland Realm Patrol. But I would imagine what the Patrol are going to do here is simply get into a position to stop moving and then return to hiding, which is one of the best ways you can skirmish as Mirkwood. Don't necessarily need to take someone head on. Pick and choose your fights and use the hiding mechanics to your advantage. Interesting to see the two Elven factions going at it first and foremost. Ooh, all sorts of Ulmo charging down the hill now. That, I was going to say, that wasn't really a particularly great idea because they've opened themselves up to a Javelin volley. There's only a couple of Javelins and I think they all missed anyway, but to even consider charging down there would have been risky considering their Spears of Amenduir. They may only be basic spears, and the Horse Swords of Ulmo may very well be very tough in melee. Still not a fight I would want to take. You definitely don't want to be feeding kills into your enemy, especially not kills on a unit like the Horse Swords of Ulmo. Meanwhile, those Woodland Realm Patrol have been really cut down to size by the Harland Guard. You need to be careful though. You don't want to put too many arrows in there because that unit is now already a lot weaker than it otherwise would have been. Mirkwood, maybe if this wasn't Mirkwood, maybe if this was a faction that had a few more numbers to play with, they would have advanced forward and tried to take advantage of the fact that they can potentially get into these archers already, but Mirkwood do need to be careful because if they do take a bad engagement, it's going to get fairly ugly for them fairly quickly. Meanwhile, Tommy coming down here, he's going to screen the Woodland protectors, make sure they can't get any easy Javelin shots in. So it's very much a game of cat and mouse so far, but Lyndon of course will be quite happy with how this has gone. Eventually Mirkwood are going to have to commit to something, but the Stewart of Dale needs to be careful. If he does that too soon, then his allies won't be in a position to help him put any sort of pressure onto this defence. Javelins coming in, few decent hits there, few kills on Noldorin Guard, a very strong unit of line infantry. If you can get rid of them, it's very much a good thing for you. Meanwhile, the Horse Swords of Ulmo, though, charging into the loose formation Woodland Protectors. Woodland Protectors are spears in melee, though, but they weren't able to bring down any of those riders, and they're going to take another charge here as well. I mean, this is the problem. The Horse Swords of Ulmo are so vicious on the charge, as all melee knights are. And the Woodland Protectors, unless you can get a full volley of your Javelins off into them as they're charging towards you, it's always going to be fairly ugly. Especially given the light mass of these Mirkwood units. Kind of easy to trample. Meanwhile, Dunland and Clansmen from Isengard thinking about putting some pressure on over here. But Rune definitely have nothing to be too concerned about yet. Because of course we're still waiting really for the entirety of the attacking force to get over here. Tundras Fox bringing his Harad across here as well. In combination with some forces from Arthedain and from Isengard. It's a very numerous force, very tough force as well, with a lot of staying power. So the attrition fight there, we'll see what Rune can do. You can see the Moomer kill just looming in the background. It's here through the middle that I'd actually be most worried about the attacks at this point, with Arthedain kind of electing not to take on the role of heading up this assault over here. It's going to be down to Dunland, and as I've said before, Dunland, They've got numbers, but they definitely don't have the quality to be going toe-to-toe with Numenor. Numenor, as long as they don't take any ridiculous fights, should be able to keep Dunland at bay all day long in this situation. Unless Dunland gets some pretty serious backup from Arthedain. There's also the fact that over here, for the time being, other than the Moomer kill sort of looming into position, it is a 1v1 here as well, and considering the higher amount of money that Lyndon will have to play with in relation to Mirkwood here, Lyndon will be pretty happy with this sort of situation. Especially with the kills that have filtered their way into the Mirkwood ranks so far. This unit of Woodland Round Patrol has taken critical damage, and they don't really have a good shot anyway. So, so far, so good for Lyndon and Tommy Visor. Yeah, you can see here, they're still sort of organising themselves, really, the attackers. Dunland... It will be interesting to see how well Dunland can actually do here. Some trolls coming across. There's still a lot of units way back here. I mean, Numenor are an intimidating faction to behold when they have a fortification that tough, but ultimately Dunland have only one thing they're good at, and that's swarming. Meanwhile, a little bit surprised actually that there hasn't been any sort of range pressure put on here early on. I mean, even if it's just something like the Harad archers putting them over here, giving Rune something to think about, but Rune have already set up a pretty brutal defence over here as well. If 3 of the attacking armies come through here and Rune receives no backup from his allies, Rune would eventually buckle, even with his skirmishers placed in a very dangerous position up here. But he would be able to get a lot of kills before that happened. It is a conundrum here for the attackers. Personally, I actually think this up ramp over here is probably the worst one to attack through, just because you have the ability as the defenders to set up a really nice skirmish position over here, which is why I'm kind of surprised actually that this appears to be where the attackers are placing a lot of their emphasis. 3 of the armies have got a big presence over here. I'm kind of the opinion that maybe right up the pipe here, right through the middle, might be overall the best way to go. Just because over here you still have the potential of skirmishers being placed on the high ground and rangers sideswiping you. It's less of an issue over here. You could still have rangers up on these areas over here, of course, but if that's the case, you can start skirmishing with them with your own archers down on the low ground, and rangers generally won't respond too well to that. But so far, very much just the beginnings of this fight. So far, the initial little skirmishes have definitely gone the way of the defenders, I think. I think Lyndon have done a pretty good job here holding Mirkwood at bay. The Moomer kill is still way back over there. It is interesting to see how spread out the attackers are. I just hope that they don't fall into the trap of just having their reinforcements too far away from the front line, because they will need to keep reinforcing the front line. There's no way they're going to smash these defensive lines to bits all that quickly, especially not the Numenorian one. They combine good skill at arms with very nice and heavy armour as well. And the shield guard here making up the first line of defence. Armour piercing spears like this, especially when they're in formation, can be a real nightmare to get through. The trademark of Gondor really, but Numenor can also do it to a certain extent. Uruk-hai archers moving forward, so we have the potential here. Dunman hunters starting to fire away. What are they actually firing at, though? Yes, they're trying to go after here the Numenorian steel bows, which is fine. Heavily armoured though, shielded. A few of them are falling away. But the steel bows, like, this is an interesting arch unit to use, because you can't be baited into using your ammunition on Dunman hunters. The armour-piercing projectiles are far too valuable for that. But if they're being shot, there is a case for saying maybe you should back them up, or maybe you should put a shielded unit in front of them, like a unit of Belagaya footmen or something, just to prevent them from being attacked in that way. Meanwhile, Huntsmen of Amon Lank charging in, and interestingly enough, that's not the worst idea, because the Flag Rim are on the front line. The Halberds, however, are in behind, so they're not providing the anti-cavalry screen that most of these front lines are going to see. Unfortunately for the Huntsmen of Amon Lank, they are a rather fragile unit of cavalry, so while they are very strong, they're going into an uphill charge with not a lot of room to gather momentum, and the archers on the high ground are going to be shooting into their backs, which is not great for them. So while I would say that's maybe a misplay from Rune, the situation is such that it can't really be exploited by the attackers. Larger March is getting into position. I mean, this is a lot of units here. Rune do need to be careful, because if I were the attackers at this point, considering how it's a little bit fragmented, I would say if there's enough units here on the front line to smash through the flag rim, I'd do it right now and try and introduce some panic into the runic lines. The longer you leave them to get set, the more difficult I think it's going to be in the long run. Spear Guard in formation. Again, tension on this front line between Isengard and Numenor. They are going to move forward now though. The first wave coming in, a combination of spears and, to be fair, the Bane Guard. The Bane Guard certainly not the worst unit you could send up against the Shield Guard. They still won't win in this situation because of the quality discrepancy, but the AP does mean that they are going to be able to do more damage than the average garbage that you would send at a Numenor line as an Orc faction. Still some support coming in from Dunland as well. Belagire Archer is going to be shooting in, which will make for a good counter to the half-orc Bane Guard, or it should at the very least. I think over on this side we're going to see a cooling of tensions for the time being between Lyndon and Mirkwood. I mean, Mirkwood are getting all of that. Well, actually, that's Ashari, so Harad have sent forward a little bit of support over to Mirkwood, but it's rather lightweight support. If I were Mirkwood, I'd probably want more cannon foddery units to help facilitate my entry into the settlement. Ashari could not be counted as cannon fodder by any means. They're a very strong unit in their own right if you can get them into melee, but also the fact that they're not really going to be good at absorbing punishment in any sort of capacity. Meanwhile, more of a genuine assault happening here as well. Huntsmen of Amonland trying to do their best. They have got some decent charges. There are a few piles of runic corpses on the front line, but now with the Gamp Rim being moved forward, that window of opportunity is well and truly closed. And to be fair to the Stewart of Dale, he has lost a few cavalrymen doing this, but he didn't really have any other way he could use that cavalry at this point in time. He could have used them potentially to help screen against the Horse Lords of Ulmo on the other side. Tundras Fox squeaking around the sides here, taking advantage of the fact that the runic line was maybe not as well crafted as Killeen was maybe thinking it was. The Scion Rim are coming forward, but at this point, very good use of the Muhard warriors, and Rune are going to need to start really opening up with their archers on that side of things. The Horns of Elos Tyrion are here, but when you have something like this going on, if the attackers take full advantage of it, it could be pretty ugly for them. Unfortunately, I think with all of these units in position, crossbows, archers, rangers, all the works basically, it's going to be pretty grisly, I think. But they do have an opportunity here, to be fair, if they keep filtering their units in. Looks like they're backing up a little bit though, not wanting to commit forward too much and take tons and tons of damage. And to be fair, I mean, the Warns of Elos Tyrion are firing, but the units that are on that front line are not all that important to the attackers, so to absorb a bit of range of fire this early in proceedings, maybe not the worst thing in the world. Variag mercenaries trying to shoot into the Arthedain marksman, I believe. Nope, they're shooting into the back of the front line. Muhard warriors have got decent shields actually, but their armour is dreadful as most Muhard units are. Ooh, hello. Half-Orc Bane Guard coming forward. It's always quite difficult. It's going to be difficult to differentiate between Isengard and Dunland on this front line, considering they share units. In come the trolls, in come some bandits as well. I mean, this is a pretty decent bit of pressure being put on. I mean, of course, the Numenorian quality is going to be such that they won't be overly concerned, but trolls coming in, it is going to lead to Numenor needing to commit forward a few more units to ensure that they maintain this position. Seafarers of Nindamos still a very damaging unit of javelins. Not a lot of ammunition though, but throwing into there, they're going to be able to rack up the kills, and then as soon as they're out of ammo, of course, they have good value as a makeshift line infantry unit. Pulling out their axes now, in fact. And they're going to get onto the front line as well. So Numenor not going to allow Dunland or Isengard easy passage in. And those javelins have done some good morale damage as well. You can see some of those units are now fleeing. This line infantry doing a good job. These Numenorian steel bows have taken a few more losses, but nothing overly important. And most of the arch support now is trying to help with the infantry assault through the middle. Over here, meanwhile, Mirkwood also coming forward, maybe in more of an aggressive fashion than I thought they would initially muster. But in come the Harland infantry and the Noldering Guard, so good quality here. They did actually manage to get into the archers, but at what cost? These spears of Emondui are now going to get butchered after being sandwiched between said archers and the mighty Nmenrean. And then further back to the Hiri out charge again. I mean, the good thing that Mirkwood have going for them here is the fact that most attacking armies, when they go up against Lindon, are going to have such a quality discrepancy against them. That's not really the case with Mirkwood, though. Yeah, the money situation is such that Lindon are obviously going to be able to afford more, but Lindon are not going to be quite as dominant in terms of their killing power as they would be against, like, the Orcs or even just the human factions. Ooh, hello. That there had the look of a trebuchet shot about it, and I do believe that would be the Arthedain trebuchet. Where did that even come from? Well, no matter. I'm sure we'll see it streak over the settlement again. The Silver Surfers from Dunland in and amongst things. They don't have their own banner carrier model yet. Bandits throwing their javelins, Uruk-hai infantry in there. Oh, there it is. It's in the trees way back over there. So it's going to try and hit the back of the Lindon army. One good hit, to be fair, on Lindon is worth quite a lot. Of course, the danger is you could get one good hit on Mirkwood as well, which would be equally as devastating for you. Playing a risky game there, Arthedain. Meanwhile, over here, still the crossmen going about their grisly work. Some Arthedain troops have now made their way to the front line. Their armour is all well and good, but they're going up against a lot of AP here in Rune, which is another one of the reasons why I'm actually quite surprised Arthedain seems to have prioritised this side of the settlement. Rune are the lowest quality of all the defenders, but their armour-piercing focus is such that they're going to be pretty good against most of the basic Arthedain units. Very good, in fact. Dismounted Serpent Guard coming in. So far, despite some initial fragilities in his defence, Rune still hold on. And this would be one of the front lines I'd be most eager to hold on to, just because the skirmish position up there is really too good to ignore. There's still plenty of reinforcements to come. What have we over here? So real cluster of a fight over here. A lot of arrows coming in. Wardens of Alos Tyrian in a very nice position, it must be said. Maybe not perfect, they're still having to arc their shots a little bit, but it's going to be pretty grisly on the front line there. The Uruk-hai pikemen not going to enjoy being under range of fire at all. They may be well armoured for pikemen, but rangers, whole different ball game to deal with the damage they can kick out when you're all blobbed up. Nmenrean, yeah, they're continuing to just sort of carve through, but you can see that a lesser unit would have died off a long time ago. This unit of even basic elven spears able to hold on for far longer. They're not going to achieve maybe as much as they would have liked. Although, having said that, they've done a decent amount of damage to this Harland Guard, and I think this unit of Harland Guard will have already expended most of its ammo anyway on the Mirkwood skirmishers. Speaking of which, those Dunedain Rangers being shot up by the Harland Guard, so there's good battlefield awareness again from the Lindon player here. Seeing the dangerous targets in the enemy ranks and going after them with whatever they can, and yeah, continuing to go after the Dunedain Rangers with those Harland Guard, definitely the right move until they get right up close. Of course, this would be the last place you'd want to be in a real siege, because you'd have rocks and all sorts thrown on your head. But Medieval 2, of course, is such that we cannot do that. Mirkwood, though, giving as good as they get here against Lindon. Oof. A good hit there, threading the needle from the trebuchet as well. A nice hit there on the pikes. Interestingly enough, though, it also clipped the Mirkwood line, and the fight was already going against them. So in spite of the fact it killed more Lindon troops there, the morale shift was enough that caused them to break. So again, that was always going to be the risk in trying to shoot into Lindon there. 4 Lindon Marines shooting their Javelins in. To be fair, with the Javelins doing damage to the Mirkwood front line, you need to do something in that situation, because if you just stand there, you're going to die anyway. So I don't necessarily think that the Arthedain player did the wrong thing there. 4 Lindon Marines being closed in on by the Palace Guard, I mean, that's going to be a very one-sided fight. All sorts of Ulmo can charge in. This is actually quite risky. If they don't get up to charge speed and do a lot of damage off the charge, which they do. They did have just enough space to get the charge off, and the anti-cavalry bonus only applies if they stick around in melee long enough for the Palace Guard to land swings. And if they can continue to cycle charge like that, it's going to be very, very punishing here for the Mirkwood forces. Yeah, another good charge coming in there. I think this was more desperation from the Stewart of Dale. He saw what was happening. He knew he was in a pretty poor situation, all things considered. He hadn't really made any ground up on Lindon, really. The Javelins and Archers were doing too much damage to him. And now the situation is such that Lyndon are probably feeling pretty good about themselves. Elsewhere on the battlefield, however, the attackers have got far more in the way of disposable manpower, which is good considering the blanket of bodies which now covers the ground. There are a fair few Numenor corpses in there as well, to be fair. Lyndon have also got some Mithlon pikemen coming over here, as well as some routing Flag Rim. Yeah, those Wardens of Tyrian have got a perfect shot down here, and now, considering the fight has broken up a little bit, the shot is also going to be clearer. They don't have to go quite so close to their own allies' soldiers. In comes the trebuchet shots. Ooh, hello. That was very fortunate, actually, because I thought there it had scored a direct hit on his allies' Moomer kill. In come the Moomer kill. I think, once again, this is more an act of desperation over here to try and keep this assault going, because the Moomer kill, while they very well could turn this fight in favour of the attackers, if they get bogged down in the Lindon pikes and javelins for too long, they will very quickly be dealt with. And there you can see the Moomer kill very much doing their thing. A grazing shot there on the Hashari from their own allies' artillery piece. Now that the Moomer kill are in the settlement, though, that is an interesting problem for the defenders to have to try and deal with here. Going after the Harland and Guard. To be fair, this unit of Harland and Guard isn't really the most important thing to be trying to deal with at this point, but it's just the path the Moomer kill have taken. Another wave comes into this front line over here. Numenor undoubtedly racking up an impressive kill count already. Over here, meanwhile, a little bit of movement actually. Dunedain Troll Slayers able to bust a hole in this side of the line. And Rune, all of a sudden, looking a little bit thin on the ground. I mean, Troll Slayers are very strong in melee. Multiple HP, huge damage on those axes. The Javelins clearly have already been used as well to devastating effect. Runic Javelins in return are also being used. So over here, perhaps unsurprisingly, considering this is clearly where the attackers were prioritising, doing much better over here. In come the Carmel's Chosen. I mean, I'm not sure what Killeen is. I'm not sure whether he had an idea of how hard he wanted to defend this point. Sort of, he didn't give it up soon enough to conserve a lot of troops, but he didn't commit enough troops forward to keep this defence going for a longer period of time. So it didn't really do either of those two things all that well. But Rune is still putting up a fight over here, if nothing else, which will, of course, allow the other defences to keep going for a longer period of time. Although I'm not sure that was the thud of, yep, saw the skipping stone effect there of the Dragon's Breath. And the Dragon's Breath, I mean, Haradrim Spearmen are shaken, but the problem here is the morale is going against Rune more so than it's going against the attackers at this stage. So, again, a misplaced shot from the artillery here is more likely to do more damage to the side who actually owns the artillery, in much the same way that the trebuchet broke Mirkwood. The Dragon's Breath may very well break what remains of that runic front line. There's still a lot of ranged support coming in here, but at this point the momentum in the melee fight is certainly with the attackers. Whether they can keep that going or not remains to be seen. The Dunedain Troll Slayers have done a lot of heavy lifting on the front line, but now they're going up against, well, now they're outnumbered. Arthedain Marksman. Yeah, they need to get more troops forward to take advantage of this hole they've made, otherwise they could very easily end up getting pushed back to the initial front line, and that's not really what you want to see as the attackers. You want to make sure that you consolidate your gains as quickly as possible. Not sure whether out of ammunition Haradrim archers are exactly what the Doctor ordered over here, but it's better than nothing. It will at least prevent them from getting pushed back for a little bit longer. Landsman of Amon Lang. Yeah, you can see here that Numenor holding Dunland at the front reasonably comfortably, sending over some reinforcements to try and help salvage Rune's position. The second unit of Carmel's Chosen coming forward as well. There you can see the corpses of the Moomer kill. They've made a nuisance of themselves back here, but little else really. They're a difficult unit to use, the Moomer kill, to be fair. It's very hard to use the Moomer kill to their maximum. If you do, they're devastating. But in a situation like this, where the defenders can contain them a little bit more easily, especially with factions with javelins on the quality of Lyndon as well, and pikes, it's going to be quite difficult, I think. But it was a measure to try and give Mirkwood a bit of breathing room that didn't really work. And Lyndon over here have had a very good time of it. And I don't think it's Mirkwood's fault, to be honest with you. I think leaving Mirkwood largely on their own to have to attack into a fortified Lindon position was always going to go relatively poorly, considering Mirkwood aren't really designed with attrition in mind. Nor did they have the money advantage over Lindon on this occasion. Harad sent stuff over, but it was sort of squishier stuff like Hashari. I do feel as though Arthedain should have sent more over here, to be honest with you. Through the middle, you can see that Numenor still, with the addition of the Lindon pikes on the front line as well as the Numenorian spears, this assault has gone about as well as you would expect. I mean, it's fortunate in this regard, I suppose. Dunland are a good faction to bring because they can keep this up for longer than most because they don't have a choice but to bring numerous units. Harad March is broken. The assault over here is starting to falter a little bit, to be fair. The arrows coming in from behind from the Nmenrean doing some good damage. But the Carmel's chosen over here, doing the business on the front line. Arthedain marksman out of ammunition, going up against out of ammunition, he's strong crossbowman. I think a bit of a regroup is in order for the attackers over here. As you can see over here, there's a massive blob which is forming up on this route upwards, but this is where Rune still have their initial line in place. Scion Rim backed up by a meek shield in the form of the Baltrog Tribesman. Yeah, I mean, you can see there the shadow bows are also momentarily visible. You can also see over here the Harad archers firing away, trying to do what damage they can with their... Oh, are they like bamboo bows? No, they're just sort of wrapped pieces of rope around it, I think, but still. Serpent Guard, defeat seems certain. Yeah, like this is the problem at this point. The attackers over here, at the very least, starting to falter, which is not a great bit of news for the attackers, to be honest with you, because that was where it looked like they were going to make some ground up in the settlement. Unfortunately, elsewhere, Merc would have outright lost over on their side. And the best I think Dunland and Isengard are going to be capable of doing over here is just keeping the attack going. I don't think they're really going to be able to seize the advantage over here, especially not with more of Lyndon's army presumably on the way. You can actually see over here as well, Hashari coming forward from Tundras Fox, revealing itself. I mean, to be fair, Lindon have taken some very heavy losses themselves over here. Whatever happened to the Horse Lords of Ulmo? Greenwood Rangers are over there. What's going on over on this side? That is Arthedain Pikemen. Horse Lords of Ulmo have got to be somewhere. I can't imagine they were killed off. Well, there's the fire arrows. They don't have the morale debuffing effect that normal fire arrows have. They're just cosmetic for the Nmenrean. The dragony theme of the Easterlings looks like they just ran out of ammunition, actually, pulling out their blades. But to be fair, I mean, with the punishment they've already taken on this front line, marksman, that there. Oof. Those units already routing, but they'll certainly stay routing now. Arthedain pikes on the front line, backed up by Fornos, Dayne Knights. ADUNAIM shadow bows closing into melee. More reinforcements on the way over from Numenor, but to be fair, once again, the attackers look like they're starting to make up some ground. Trollmen are now being sent up against Variag mercenaries. More signs that perhaps Harad and Arthedain are starting to make inroads over here, but is it going to be soon enough? Sapphire Bladesmen. They were taking some hits there from the Arthedain marksmen, but they go back into hiding just in time to prevent critical damage. Northern Blade Masters moving forward. Yeah, it's been incredibly punishing on this front line for Dunland and Isengard. Isengard a little bit more up for this sort of... I mean, you can see here the crossbows, the axe throwers. To be fair, with all of Isengard's sort of reasonably tanky units, the support units Dunland have as well, the Trollshire axe throwers, the crossbows, which are their own, you would think that they wouldn't be doing too badly, and to be fair, they're not. When you have a look and you actually consider the damage which is being done here, you can see massive holes being caused by the Trollshire axe throwers, and actually now the Uruk-hai pikemen starting to gain the upper hand. Again, it's been a terrible cost for both sides, but especially the attackers. Even if the attackers do manage to gain entry in here, I'm not sure how much they're going to have to play with when it comes to roaming around within. So, oh, hello. bits of the settlement crumbling. A stray shot from the Dragon's Breath. Balshos Sapphire Bladesman doing some damage up close and personal. They're firing into the Beast Hunters. I think they're just firing at a unit they have a clear shot on. Again, maybe not the most powerful force in melee. Ooh. Well, Rune need to be pretty careful with doing that, to be honest with you. I can understand why they're doing it. They're trying to get some good hits here on some units which are far better than the units they have in melee, but they're losing this fight. And hits like that are going to result in what little resistance they're still putting up against stuff like the Trollman. It's going to result in them breaking. Another unit of Troll Slayers has come forward from Arthedain. Powerful Javelins. Sapphire Bladesman and Troll Slayers are actually fairly similar. Troll Slayers you can bring 2 of, Sapphire Bladesman only 1. Sao and Rim are closing in on the Troll Slayers. I mean, they'll stop them from firing momentarily, but that's a fight the Troll Slayers will most certainly win. Unit type advantage and quality advantage going for them there. Shadow Bows. Firing away. I'm amazed these Eastron Crossbowmen are putting up as decent a fight as they are on the front line. I mean, they have got Numenorians alongside them. Whatever happened to the Trollmen? Oh, they were pulled back. Okay. So again, I mean, both sides looking heavily battered and bruised on all fronts at this point, to be fair, but I think over here the attackers are actually going to win, so through sheer bloody mindedness, Dunland and Isengard are going to gain entry into the settlement, I think. But on the other 2 fronts, I would suggest the defenders are probably going to be in the ascendancy, and with a unit like this free to roam on the battlefield, the Pharazim Nobles, that could be potentially a big problem going later into the fight. I'm not sure where the Horse Lords of Ulmo have sequestered themselves away to. I'd be surprised if they weren't charging into the enemy. There goes some Balshos Tribesmen. I can't imagine they all died either, though. Don't know where they've gone, because that is even scarier than the Pharazim Nobles, to be honest, because of their lances as opposed to swords. Another unit of dismounted Serpent Guard coming in. Again, decent quality. Again, I really don't think that... The problem the attackers have is they haven't, much in the same way as Rune over here, they haven't really fully committed, but they haven't really fully held back either. I can understand not wanting to move everything in, because otherwise they're just going to get shot in the back by Shadow Bows, but the Shadow Bows are not falling into the bait of shooting these individual units so far. Which kind of defeats the point, because it means eventually you're going to get shot in the back. It's just that your army will be exhausted by the time you do. Sapphire Bladesman on the front line now. Pulling out their, I guess you'd call it a Falx. I've always referred to it as a big, like, Karambit sword. But I'm not really entirely sure. I'd refer to it as a Falx. Very well acquainted with them after acquiring one in Bannerlord. Numenorian cohort over here. So yeah, you can see here the attackers now. Finally, I mean, they needed this, really. They needed to make something happen, and finally they are. The few remaining Wardens of Elos Tyrion on the front line. It's been a very bloody fight, but eventually they have made it through. There's a few Nazkai, I mean, I say a few, 45 of them still alive, as well as a decent core infantry and pikes, and then a few supporting units from Dunland, but Dunland, of course, very much on their last legs. Numenorian cohort pulling back, Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen going to try and get a few volleys off. I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to. They do get 1 volley off, or half a volley, before the Uruk-hai infantry prevent them from firing anymore. Good reactions there from Isengard, because a full volley from that could have been quite devastating indeed. Well, here, yeah, Pharazim Nobles getting into the back lines as quickly as they possibly could. Riders of Orthanc pulling out those big morning stars. I mean, this is interesting. The Riders of Orthanc are a strong unit of cavalry. I think, interestingly enough here, the problem has been that the Pharazim Nobles have already taken a little bit of damage. I would still back them in a fight against the Riders of Orthanc, but it's going to be pretty punishing for both sides. I mean, the Riders of Orthanc have probably already used up their crossbow bolts at this point, to be fair. So using them to sort of stop the enemy cavalry from getting in behind them and charging in might not be the worst thing in the world. But they are a bodyguard tier unit, the Riders of Orthanc, so, and presumably AP with those like spiked mallets that they're wielding and morning stars. Over here, meanwhile, depleted Serpent Guard getting in here to this straggler unit of fallen Marines, and they're going to be able to finish them off. So I think here is where we're going to see the attackers finally seize a bit of momentum in this fight. It's been a long time coming, but they have eventually managed to get there. Trollshaw axe throwers coming in here, just supporting the Isengard push. The issue here, of course, is even isolated pockets like this are going to be able to put up a good fight because of the quality of the units on display. And finally, you can see here, Harad and Arthedain able to get through, but there's not much of them left, is there? Beast Hunters, Arthedain Pikes are still the champions of Nmenrean, a very strong unit. Shadow Bows taking a bit of damage from those Greenwood Rangers, which have actually managed to get all the way around here from the other side, of course. No need to keep patrolling the other choke point now, since the Mirkwood assault fell apart. Meanwhile, Belagair Archers up close and personal now with some Arthedain Marksmen and some dismounted Serpent Guards. So a lot of these units actually haven't been saved. They have been caught as the attackers have barged through the first layer. And you do need to try and save as many of these units as you can, because this phase of a battle, usually when the initial defence has fallen and the attackers surge forward, this is where the attackers can really make up some ground in terms of kills. Oof, in come the Riders of Orthanc, who are actually alive and well, which is perhaps not the best sign for the Pharazim nobles, and indeed it isn't. I did also notice the fact that there were crossbows that were helping the Riders of Orthanc, which is a massive deal. I heard the bolts firing, and if the Uruk-hai crossbows were helping the Riders of Orthanc, considering the AP they already have, that would explain why that fight went so heavily in favour of the Dunland Riders there. Unsupported Pharazim nobles that are not moving. That was some good interplay, and I have to say, actually, I think Dunland and Isengard, considering the beating they've taken, have actually played off with one another very well. A rear charge into the Numenorian cohort. The Trollmen of Harad, already a really strong unit. Cavalry in this phase of a siege is at its most dangerous, and the fact that the attackers have a cav advantage is very important here. Charging in again to these ADUNAIM shadow bows, making them break. Some good quality units still on display. I mean, a Numinous Gate Guard's always nice to have pikes in the late game. Single unit pikes can make all the difference. Dismounted Knights of Numinous, Nazkai, Champions of Nmenrean. Like, the attackers are battered at this point, but they have the kind of units that you would want to have in the late game. Whether they have enough of them remains to be seen. Belagair Archers putting up a fight. They will ultimately lose, but they are at least killing off a few more unit models as we enter, well, get closer to the final 10k frames, where I would assume the last part of the battle will begin around the statue of Sauron. I do kind of like the fact that this is like the ADUNAIM outpost, so it's meant to be like a Numenorian stronghold. I kind of like the fact that it's as it is, and then it looks like this statue of Sauron was erected after the rest of the outpost, sort of signify the rise of the Black Numenorians. It's pretty neat. Seafarers of Mindamos routing off. The last of the resistance over here being swept away. Still the Belagair Archers putting up a fight. I mean, to be fair, it's Belagair Archers against Arthedain Marksmen. And the Belagair Archers winning this fight. Numbers advantage. So there's still this little bit of resistance, which maybe the attackers haven't accounted for. Maybe not the most important unit, but you never know. I mean, seen in the past, units, well, obviously they're going to lose now with Dunedain Troll Slayers on hand, but seen in the past, battles decided by less than 40 men before. There goes the Bearded Elf. Brought down. Yeah, Champions of Nmenrean moving forward. Interesting that they're actually in the vanguard. Going forward first. Trying to get up to the... What have we got going on here? Harad trying to put some pressure on the initial line. Royal Legion of Armenelos still alive, so Numenor have still got their quality units as well as the Pharazim Swordmasters, which is a massive deal actually. Numenor's quality still alive, Cummel's chosen, still some steel bows. Yeah, I think the problem here that the attackers are going to run into is the defenders still have good enough quality to hold the attackers at bay, but the defenders have also got superior support in place. Seafarers, you know, if they still have javelins, which I believe they do. Indeed they do. Damaging javelins, a couple of units of them, steel bows, armour piercing arrows. And eventually the attackers are going to have to move in. The onus is always on the attackers to be the ones to move the battle forwards. These Balagar... Meanwhile, the Dunedain Troll Slayers were actually pulled back away from this fight over here, which I find somewhat bemusing, because it means that those few Arthedain marksmen are going to be defeated, and these Balagar archers will still be here, although now they won't be. A charge coming in from the Dunland riders, and that's going to be enough surely to break them. Indeed it is. So finally those Balagar archers lasted longer than they had any right to. Finally dealt with. You can see the, well here, the elves continuing to shout Illidan. Well, I mean the problem here is like filtering in units like this is all well and good, but I think what they're trying to do here is bait the defenders into using some of their support, but they really don't need to, because the problem here is the units that have been sent into this front line over here are just going to be no threat to the units which are marshalling this choke point. Like, these Numenor units are of very high quality, especially the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Going to need to send forward something just a little bit more serious. Very depleted crossbowmen. Mirkwood still kind of alive. These are the elves which continue to shout. 2 bowmen in the Woodland Realm Patrol and their banner carrier remain, continuing to try and do what damage they can. Their ammo will last a long time, however much they have left, with only 2 archers. In come Dunland. I mean, this is going to be interesting because they have some quality here, the attackers, but it's going to be hard on them in terms of numbers, I think. There's still the Dragon's Wrath crossbows as well, which did manage to escape the clutches of Isengard in the end. The damage they can do could well prove to be terminal if they get a good shot off, which I think that's the only body-piercing unit that the defenders have left at their disposal, but they still have armour-piercing archers, to be fair, so armour-piercing archers and javelins and good quality in melee. As far as some sword masses in particular are going to be a worry, I think, for the attackers. The closest thing in terms of quality they have to them, the Nazkai have already taken damage, so it would probably be the champions of Nmenrean, to be honest with you. And in a fight between the two, the Farazim Swordmasters will come out on top. You can see what they're trying to do here. They're trying to skirmish. The Greenwood Rangers, if they stay here, the Farazim Swordmasters are going to eat them alive. I like the fact that they've got sort of like a dual wielding arrangement going on here. And in they come. That makes them very similar to the Wardens of Alostirian, though, come to think of it. Yeah, so the Farazim Swordmasters, of course, easily going to be able to mop up what remains of these Greenwood Rangers. Doing far better than their mounted brethren. You know, they have sort of exposed themselves a little bit to fire from the Uruk-hai crossbowmen, but there's not really enough of them, and in the Greenwood Rangers at this point, they're going to die very quickly at the hands of a unit like this. Oh no, it's the Spears of Orthanc getting into position, so their crossbow bolts, I mean, could it be? Could the ultimate bait be on? They've managed to bait the Farazim Swordmasters in. I thought the Spears of Orthanc were out of ammunition, to be honest with you. Apparently not. A few volleys from them could be exactly what the Doctor ordered for the attackers. Meanwhile, Numenorian steel bows firing in. They're going after the Nazkai. That's a good choice of target, to be fair, because of how good they are in melee. And the armour-piercing arrows will certainly have the desired effect. But there's still the champions of Nmenrean, there's still the Trollmen, there's still the dismounted Knights of the Numenor, so there's plenty of targets to be going after. But crossbows? To be fair, maybe I did underestimate the amount of support the attackers still had left in them. I mean, crossbows are a very good supporting unit to have as well. Troll Slayers. The issue, I think, ultimately is going to be how much ammunition they actually have left, because they have used some of their ammunition on the front to get this far into the settlement. There's also the fact that those Farazim Swordmasters are going to be victorious regardless of the crossbow bolts getting into them. Here come the Javelins. The Gate Guards are a unit they actually do need to take down with range, I think. So if it comes down to pure melee, the Gate Guards are going to be a real issue to try and deal with. Ooh, Dragon's Breath cannon crew. Of course, they're a very strong cannon crew in melee, so they actually do have some use here. There go the Guathlo trackers. Not making it very far, unsurprisingly. Sapphire Blazemen, who were saved. That's another important unit to save. Yeah, I think running out of supporting tools here, this I think could probably be the killer blow though from Rune. If these Dragon's Wrath crossbows can get a good volley or two off, which they are going to be able to do here, right into the heart. Ooh, killing off some dismounted Knights of Numenor. Yeah, I think that might be that. Seafarers of Nindamos and Mithlon Marines don't have much ammunition as far as Javelins go, but I think they have already done a pretty good job. Arthedain Pikemen trying to hold the Pharazim Swordmasters at bay, because I think the intent here from the defenders is to come over here and then counter-attack around the sides with the Carmel's chosen Pharazim Swordmasters and the out-of-ammunition Seafarers, which certainly not the worst idea. The Champions of Nafrat may be on the way over, but overwhelming force could still very well play into this. The addition of the Pikes is interesting, but I don't know. Riders of Orthanc, I mean, could they get in behind enemy lines? Probably not. I mean, you could probably go around here. There's no Pikes guarding over here. Over here on the front, though, there are Spearmen. You don't really want to be getting too involved with that. Trollmen doing their best. Naru and Aru Sentinels, I mean, there are Pikes on this front line as well, albeit right in the middle of things. I think King Amar's probably got the right idea. I mean, trying to get the cavalry in through this area over here is probably one of the better chances the attackers have of making this stick and doing some damage. The problem with doing that, though, is it becomes immediately apparent what the idea is. And that other unit of Seafarers is going to make a pretty good blocker just to prevent that cavalry from getting in. And the Pikes, their formation has already been buckled a little bit here. They pushed a little bit too far forward, and now their formation is gone, and they're going to get butchered by Pharazim Swordmasters. And as soon as the Carmel's Chosen come in down here, I think that will be overwhelming force. Numenorian steel bows out of ammunition. To be fair, like, yeah, a lot of the support at this point is out of ammo. You can see the shadow bows have got their blades out. It's really only the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, but I mean, that's a very significant unit to have in reserve. They're getting shot by the crossbowmen, but the damage, I think, has already been done from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. I think at this point it's only going to be a matter of time before the attackers simply don't have anything else left to give. My. Yeah, here we go. Here come the Carmel's Chosen, which I do think is the right call. Shadow bows coming in as well. So yeah, they can try and do overwhelming force over here, and then they can just wrap up the line. Although, to be fair, that front line may very well fall apart quicker than this one, because the Champions of Nafrat are in good enough shape. Dunedain Trollslayer is going to try and make something happen. Been a good unit for Arthedain in this battle, in tough circumstances. Spears of Orthanc, going to try and shoot, but the amount of damage they can do at this point, I think, is going to be a bit of a footnote. It's a close battle, this, though. There's not much of the defenders left, in all fairness. But we are in for the slow grind to the end, and best of all, the frame rate is not collapsing in on itself just yet. Touch wood. That change to take away the blood spray from the Rangers has been, from my perspective, one of the better choices the game has made, because it's made stuff so much easier to endure in longer battles like this. Also, I do think the addition of this side path that really adds a lot to this map overall. It's a good map. Again, the thing with maps like this is, as we just take a little trip away from the front line just momentarily, a lot of detail is put into sort of the outer reaches of it, which you never really get to see used in a mechanical sense. Like these hamlets and hills out here, like, you're not really going to be able to get to see them, because this settlement is big enough that you kind of need all your armies to defend it if you're going to do it properly. It's just one of those things. Attention to detail. Even if it's not really going to be used all that often, it makes all the difference to a high quality product. Victory seems certain for the champions of Neferat. I mean, I suppose that crossbow support has borne fruit, because there's not many Pharism Swordmasters left by the looks of things. The pike support also just about still alive. I don't think it's going to matter in the long run. I mean, the Carmel's Chosen are still going to be tough to bring down. Those Riders of Orthanc are still going to need to get in behind enemy lines somehow. And here on the front line, it's already all but over. Dunedain Trollslayers coming in. There's still this Numenorian steel bow unit which has yet to really commit itself to melee as well. I think there's more construction work going on, so I can only apologise if you hear that. Riders of Orthanc, they have managed to get in behind enemy lines at this point, to be fair. This is interesting. I mean, what the Riders of Orthanc actually do with this position now is going to be fairly interesting. They can't afford to get bogged down like that in the Seafarers. What the Riders of Orthanc need to do is probably charge into the rear of the front line over there, because it's going so heavily against the attackers at this point that they need to charge in over there into the rear. That could be the thing which makes a real difference in this fight, but they need to pick up the pace here, the Riders of Orthanc. They are moving at a snail's pace at the moment, which, you know, the situation on the battlefield is such that they don't really have that luxury. In fact, the assault over here has fallen apart, really. Mythlon Marines now surging forward, engaging the Troll Slayers in melee. There's still some Snaga back here, but yeah, there's not much fighting on the front line anymore. Uruk-hai crossbows. There goes the Arthedain General. The steel bows, which is a good thing they were held in reserve actually now, because now they can get in the way of the cavalry. The Isengard General falls by the wayside. Ar-Pharazôn is there with his tall golden helmet. What will the riders do? I mean, I think at this point the ship has sailed for the riders. What have we got going on over here? Yeah, champions of Neferat. Balance of forces evenly matched. I mean, it's to their great credit that they've been able to make as good a fight as they had of this. It shows how strong the champions of Neferat are. But ultimately their support has abandoned them, which means the superior numbers of the Carmel's Chosen and what remains of the Swordmasters and Seafarers should be sufficient to bring them down. And yeah, I mean, late game pikes always going to be very nice if you still have them. I mentioned that with regards to the Anuminas Gate Guards. It's certainly true for the Narun Aru Sentinels as well. Mythlon Marines on clean-up duty over here. Going to be able to finish off these Snaga in double quick order. Apologies for that. Again, I swear, every time I start doing something, it's now we'll call him up. We'll give him a phone now. Not when he's doing nothing, no. Only when he's busy. Regardless, Pharazim Swordmasters and Carmel's Chosen together, finally bringing down the champions of Neferat. I'm actually a little bit surprised that there's still 4,000 frames left to go in this fight, to be honest with you, because I'd imagine it will have to be the Spears of Orthanc being as tanky as they are and putting up a decent last stand of it, because can't imagine it would be any other reason. Again, the two gems in the Orthanc roster are the two unique units that they have. Certainly very strong in their own right. Nasty looking sort of Vulge-esque spears alongside their large arbalists. Dragon's Wrath crossbows still going to have to take down the Riders of Orthanc as well. They will be able to do that, of course, because eventually the Riders of Orthanc, even if they were able to cycle charge literally everything to death, eventually they're going to have to go after the Sentinels, which they will not escape unscathed from. And even then, I don't think they're going to be able to cycle charge absolutely everything to death. That's the Harad General, to be fair. Fighting there with the two slender swords, in sharp contrast to the rather savage implements that the champions of Neferat as a whole unit wield. Here the Spears of Orthanc actually shaken, looking like they might rout. They'll certainly rout now with a rear charge from the Pharazim Swordmasters. Doing their best, but ultimately I think the attackers just took such a beating on the outer layers at different times. First it was Mirkwood over on the left hand side there, then it was Dunland and Isengard through the middle, and then over there sort of consistently with the archers shooting them in the back. And I just think it was a choice of where to prioritise. I think that was the issue for the attackers. I don't think they supported Mirkwood enough as a team, to be honest with you. Like, leaving Mirkwood to their own devices in this kind of battle is not going to suit them very well, because they don't have the disposable troops at their disposal in the same way that especially Dunland have. I feel as though Arthedain could have sent over more. If Harad was going to send over support, it shouldn't have been even more fragile units, in my opinion. The Hashari are all well and good. They're good in melee, as you would perhaps expect, but ultimately you're not really covering for the Mirkwood weaknesses all that well by sending the Hashari over there. What is actually left at this point? No, Riders of Orthanc are just cycle charging in. I mean, at this point, you may as well just charge in and let your units die off. I mean, it's sort of rather desperate stat padding at this point in time. There's also a Dunedain Troll Slayer over there. Throwing those jabbies in. There we go. No, he gets away. There he goes. Not the only one left. I'd assume that's the one Troll Slayer. Well, there goes the Harad General as well. Lasting quite a long time on the front line. And then it's just this guy standing next to the statue of Sauron. Defiantly. But to no avail. There he goes. And there must be something else then. What is this something else? Something over there? Yep, Arthedain Marksmen. There they are. 3 of them. Surely they're going to rout before ever entering into melee. Yeah, they're wavering already. As soon as they get anywhere near the Balchos, yeah, there they go. And there we go. An impressive fight, to be sure. And that is not an accurate kill count, unfortunately. I suppose it is with the routing units, but I missed the chance to actually see what the accurate version was. I'd imagine, based on the troops that are left, it's probably about 100 to 96 or 97. Which is a very fine statistic indeed. So, very even performances all around, I would say. On both sides, actually. There wasn't really a great deal of discrepancy or deviation in any of the players on either side, to be honest with you. I mean, Lyndon got slightly more kills than their allies, but not by a huge amount, not by any sort of significant degree. And then over on this side, slightly less on Isengard, but you kind of expect that, considering the fact that they were sort of going forwards into a really grisly situation with Dunland, and Dunland actually got more kills because of their support more so than in melee, I would imagine. We'll actually have a look at that right now. So Dunland, Spears of Orthanc did okay. The Riders of Orthanc in particular did quite well though with their crossbows, and then obviously in melee charging in as well. Trollshore Axe Throwers also getting a decent amount of kills, but yeah, in melee you can see that Dunland were no match for Numenor. Their kills really did come from their support. Even the Blackwold struggled, but in a situation like that where they're easy to shoot, that's not too surprising. Isengard, I would imagine a higher proportion of kills in melee for them, but still I would say the crossbows probably propped them up a bit. But yeah, a good quality fight all around. Very close. I think the defenders do deserve to win because they played it very much by the book and did it well enough. And unfortunately, I think the attackers, I think I'll repeat it again. I think what let them down was ultimately the fact that they didn't organise themselves as well as they perhaps could have. I think it was leaving Mirkwood to their own devices over there, and the only support they really got were more fragile units. Wasn't going to help them against Lyndon, to be honest. I mean, Hashari in melee against Lyndon, that's fine. And I don't begrudge Harad sending them over as well as the Moomer kill. But I think some tougher units, some more numerous units were needed. Whether Dunland could have spared that, I doubt, because of how tough the middle was. I think maybe Arthedain could have gotten away with sending a couple of units of Arthedain men-at-arms and maybe a unit of Arthedain marksmen just to try and help keep that assault going. As it was, that was where I think the difference was, because on the other two sides, a lot of losses, but eventually the attackers made it through because they had more disposable units. It wasn't the case as Mirkwood. And that could also be, a really good example of how bringing the elves in this sort of situation, when you're on the attacking into a very nice defense like this, the elves do have some very real shortcomings in that regard, especially the more lightly armoured ones in Lindon, if the roles were reversed, and Mirkwood, because they don't have the same sort of staying power when the situation gets as ugly as that. Imladris do more so, I would suggest, because obviously heavier armour, more of an up close and personal focus overall anyway. But yeah, it's one of those situations where having a sort of smaller, higher quality army can really work against you if you're not able to overcome the defences quickly. If you're held in place too long, it will be tough for you. So yeah, big thank you to King Amar, and I believe it was Tommy Wiseau. It could have been new player 195 actually as well. Whoever it was on the defending team that sent me the battle as well. Big thank you. It was quite a while ago at this point. It was just after the new patch released. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of this battle as well. It was a very good one. Obviously it wasn't... this actually has been the first siege I've shown in about a week or so on Reforged, which has actually been sort of free of errors that I would complain about normally. Like, I don't like being overly sort of complaining too much about how people are playing, because it's a game at the end of the day. Like, I don't really want to do that. But I've seen enough of the game at this point to the point where sort of seeing the same mistakes over and over again, I just can't help but comment on them. But that wasn't really the case this time around. Like, it was more a sort of overall organisational problem that the attackers had, more so than just having completely the wrong idea about how and when to commit units. That wasn't really the issue here, I don't think. So yeah, big thanks to all involved. I think next up is... Well, next up actually is interesting, because the schedule I've been running on recently has been sort of 2 videos every 3 days, one of them being sort of a battle as it normally is in Reforged or Silmarillion, as is Arise now. The other has been the troop tree overviews for Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. I kind of want to keep the same schedule, but I'm not actually quite sure yet what I want to replace the troop tree overviews from Bannerlord with, because obviously there's only 6 of them and I've already gone through all of them. I want to replace that with something. I have a couple of ideas, but I'll sort of think through that in the next couple of days. And so yeah, the next video is kind of a mystery, to be honest, because I haven't really decided fully on what it's going to be yet. But the next battle replay, we might be making a return to Silmarillion, or we might be doing another battle in Reforged. It depends kind of how much university work I've done that day and how much time and effort I can put into it. If I have enough time, I'll do a big siege in Reforged. If I don't, then I will do another showcase battle from the continually developed Silmarillion. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.